one of my favourite places because I love the boats. I quite like all the chimneys. And you can see the Freeport over there, so it's a real mixture of different things going on. I think that I am an activist, for sure. I think when you are born with a disability, or you acquire one early on in your life experiences mean that your impairment becomes so much a part of you that it's almost impossible to ignore it. And I am a very political animal, and I have a passion for trying to solve injustices where I see them. And because my own experience as a disabled person is quite positive, because my disability doesn't really affect what I can and can't do. I can do almost everything that I want to do. There's an old man sitting just behind us, staring like crazy on the park bench. Oh dear. What I get out of my activism is the ability to see the frustrations that I've had and the disappointments that I've had, and how those are multiplied in people who have more severe disabilities than I have, and try and make some changes in order to make sure that people have the opportunity, like I've had, to live a very independent life. In Malta, people live with their parents until they get married quite often, and because disabled people don't end up in relationships as often in Malta, they do tend to end up living with their families, and I think that's a shame, because it inhibits their ability to make their own choices and to be really independent. And I think that a lot of disabled people, given the opportunity, would like to be able to live on their own, would like to move out from their parents and see if they can do it. And my activism is all around encouraging solutions and putting forward solutions that I think will enable other disabled people to be able to have the same opportunities that I've had. I'm not expecting disabled people here to up and move sticks to another country like I did, and maybe that's a degree of independence that people in Malta wouldn't want anyway, but I think that the quality of my life, because I've been able to make my own decisions, has been a lot higher, and as a result I am keen that other disabled people get the same opportunities that I do to be able to make these decisions for themselves. And there are so many areas like employment and education where they're getting substandard services, and as a result they're not in a position to be able to do the things that I really like to do. So there are inequalities out there, and my whole being is striving. It's something that's in my head constantly, that I am thinking about ways of trying to improve situations that disabled people face here, because they don't have the opportunities that I have had. And whilst things are getting better here, there's still a fairly long way to go. So I think that activism does work. I wish people protested a bit more here. I don't think you see Maltese people protesting, and I think that protests are something that in the UK worked very well, and got a lot of changes through quite quickly. I don't know whether it would happen here, because I think the Maltese culture is very different from the UK culture, but I am always looking for an opportunity to protest about something, because I think that if you make protest, it gives more awareness to, and more education about the issues to Maltese society as a whole, and that can't ever be a bad thing, even if they're irritated that you're in the way and protesting about something. You're going to upset some people, but actually I think that's worth it in order to be able to get an opinion across. about something that you feel really strongly about. I think that non-disabled people in Malta have an attitude which is informed by the church and by a history of attitudes towards disabled people that has meant that disabled people are viewed as charity cases. They're viewed as people who need assistance, people who have to be looked after. They're not viewed as people who have the same ambitions and aspirations as non-disabled people. And I think that until we actually get disabled people in the workplace doing good jobs, and we get disabled people coming out of education with a desire to go on and do further education, to get master's degrees, to get PhDs, until something like that happens, we are in a position where society is not aware that disabled people even want to do these things. And if you don't see disabled people doing it and showing that disabled people can do it, then the attitude that they need to be protected and looked after will persist. It's not helped by a lot of media coverage. I think that the pitying and the charity aspects are very overdone on Maltese television. And I think, again, it's influenced by the church, and it's influenced by a long history of disabled people not being given the opportunities, but also not demanding opportunities. And I think that what we're starting to see now is people who are actually trying to get things done themselves. Disabled people are trying to improve their own lives and doing things because they want to see them done rather than have other people do things for them. So in a lot of respects, you say, what can non-disabled people do? I would rather they did less on the charitable front, that they accepted more, and that they let us get on with it, because I think that there are disabled people out there who, given the opportunity to get on with it, would. And I think at the moment it doesn't happen.
Oh, very poignant. Pensive.
I'm very deep, really. I think that attitudes towards ability has to change. It's no good if you say this person can't do that, because there is always a way for a person to be able to do it. What it does is it shows the limitations in non-disabled people's ability to think round the problem and outside the box. There are always ways of being able to do things. You know, disabled people are very good at finding solutions and ways of doing things that non-disabled people won't ever come up with. So ask a disabled person, you know, how are we going to do this, rather than say you can't do it. So I think that looking at the abilities that disabled people have, as opposed to the problems that they perceive, is very important. I think that as that happens, that society needs to realise that because you have an impairment, whether it's a visual impairment or a hearing impairment, an intellectual impairment, or physical impairment, you still have the same aspirations. You know, you still want to be able to go out on a Friday night with your mates and go to a bar. You still want to be able to get a job. You still want to be able to get around the island in a relatively easy manner, to go to different places. You want to be able to socialise. You want to have these opportunities. And I think that non-disabled people, probably because they're scared of how they would feel with the impairment, assume that if you have an impairment, you have no aspirations and no desires. And I think if they understood how frustrating that is, they would be quite shocked, because there is nothing worse than having a conversation with somebody and you suddenly realise that they have no comprehension of the fact that I want to do a PhD. and I want to have a job where I can really make a difference. I want people to be aware of how disabled people are treated in Malta, and these are things that, and I do that by talking about my own experiences, but the aspirations of people need to be understood, because we are exactly the same human beings, you know. If you prick us, we still bleed. It's an understanding that the impairment doesn't stop the person being a human being, and I think that's really important. That's one of the most important things I think that we need to change, because if people understand that aspirations are the same, then they will be more accepting, in my opinion, of the need that disabled people have to be fully included. So you will get situations where they will be more willing to employ disabled people. They'll be more willing to make necessary arrangements so that people can live independently. And that obviously requires funding, and that means that something else has to not be funded. And I understand that, you know, I'm an accountant. I appreciate that you can't have every disabled person given every single service that they need, but it's important that where you have disabled people who could achieve a real independence and make a contribution to the economy as opposed to taking from it, by giving them a service. I think that's really important, and for me it's a no-brainer. So these are things that I think will bring about changes for disabled people in Malta.